You're on 94.9. It's 14 minutes past 4 and it's Tuesday afternoon. That means it's time for Creation Ministries International. And today we have Dr. John in the studio. Good afternoon, Dr. John.
Good afternoon, Mick.
Great to have you in the studio. I mean, we've had a very interesting few weeks, but it's always great to have you back in here, Dr. John.
Well, look, it's a month since I was here.
Yep.
And I haven't actually been able to listen to the other speakers on a Tuesday for the last month, so I don't really know what they've been talking about. But I trust it all went well. And
it was awesome. Yeah, we had a bit of a chat about sharks one week, and all interesting.
It's fairly nasty topic at the moment.
Sharks definitely a nasty topic, and look, another one is people have been talking about things like Ebola. That's the issue over in Africa.
Yeah, well, interesting that you mentioned that because I had to was asked to give a talk at my retirement village, a week ago on viruses and vaccines, for that very reason, because people are, they hear about things like Ebola, and there's another one that I want to talk about as well.
In the news, yeah.
Yeah, and, you turn on the TV and they're always asking you to go and get vaccinated for everything under the sun,
Yep.
But, the question is, I suppose, should we be concerned about Ebola? Well, the answer to that really is no. It's not particularly likely. It's only been there in West Africa, and it's not very likely that we're going to have any problems there, probably because of the way that it's transmitted, even though it's a nasty virus.
Yep.
But the other one that the guys at the village wanted to talk about was this hantavirus, because you might remember that that was on a cruise ship.
Yep.
Right, and of course everybody's going on cruise ships, so they're all a bit concerned about that. And there was an outbreak on this cruise ship that about 2 months ago, and it was a bad one because a few people actually died.
Yep.
But hantavirus is one of the ones that's spread by rats.
Yep.
Right, and apparently the rat droppings get aerosolized in the air conditioning or whatever and infect people that way. But as I said to the people at the village, there was one good thing about it. At least they knew the ship wasn't going to sink. Because the rats were still there.
Yep.
Yeah. But, apparently it was quite heavily infested with rats. But I don't think that's particularly likely in the bigger ships that most of us are going cruising on. But what the talk gave me was an opportunity to talk about DNA and RNA. And I was able to show a lot of the slides because I was doing a PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
And I was able to show a lot of the slides that I've used in my creation talks, particularly the slides relating to the Human Genome project. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not sure whether I must have talked about that on this program before, but that was a project that ran in the US between about 1990 and about 2005. It was about 15 years, and the whole idea was to examine human DNA and work out the totality of our genome, that is, all our DNA, and print it all out.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a couple of slides of the guy who was the Dr. Craig Venter. He was the leader of the commercial team that did the project. And he was the first person on Earth to have his entire genome printed out, right? And I've got a photo of him standing in front of his printout, and it is 175 volumes, right? Each volume has 750 A4 sheets.
Oh, wow.
Printed on both sides in small font.
Wow.
It's 260,000 sheets in all.
Wow.
I mean, it is just amazing.
Yep.
And, of course, the way it's printed out, DNA is a program, as we know, and it's a program made up of organic chemical compounds, and there are 4 of them, the nucleic acids that are used, and we give them their first letters, A, T, G, and C, so that when you just use the letters, you can see that it's a program.
Yep.
And I mean, it is just an absolutely astonishing program. And I was thinking of the comparison with our computer programs. You know, supposing you walked into a robotized car factory, right? And you'd see all these robots building the cars, you know, and you would know that there's this amazing program behind it all directing the robots.
Yep.
And if you had a look at that program, you'd see all the keyboard symbols, but really there are only 2, you know, on and off, you know.
Yes. Ones and twos, or zeros and ones, yes.
Yeah, every keyboard symbol is just a combination of 2.
Yep.
And you would know that nothing would happen until you flicked the switch and the power went on, right? And because it runs by electricity. And you would know that somewhere away from there would be a power station that's generating the electricity.
Yep.
Let's say it's a coal-fired power station, and coal is the fuel that generates the electricity.
Yep.
Now, if you think about you yourself, right? Your DNA is the program, the software, just like the software that runs the robotized car factory.
Yep.
Right? And that software was there from your conception, and it completely built you being the hardware, right? And all the pieces, you know, the engines and, you know, all of that hardware inside you, right? And it also runs on electricity.
Yep.
Right? And to produce the electricity which you produce, right, you take in fuel in the form of food, and you generate your own electricity, and your computer program that's in you runs the hardware. Absolutely amazing.
Yep.
But the interesting thing is that we think our computer programs, say running a robotized car factory, are pretty smart. But they've only been around for about 50 to 80 years or whatever, right? But God did that 6,000 years ago.
Yes.
You know, so we're really only copying what he did.
Yep.
Well, I mean, man didn't copy it. He probably generated it from thoughts and whatever, the spirit inspired or whatever. But it wasn't you, you know. And when you look at comparing the programs, our computer programs only use 2 symbols. God used 4, right? So it's a little bit more complex. And it was a complete self-starter right from the beginning. You know, powered by electricity, but once the switch went on, it doesn't stop for hopefully 80-odd years or a bit more.
Yeah, well, it used to be more, but the program's slowly deteriorating.
Well, some of them are. But look, I think it is absolutely amazing. And when you see it printed out, you realise just how foolish evolutionary belief is, because not even the simplest program that you can imagine ever wrote itself by trial and error. Every program has got an intelligent programmer who wrote it, and there's nothing in existence that even remotely approaches the human DNA program for complexity. I mean, it is, you know, it's self-correcting. It does everything by itself. Even AI could not compete with it. It really is fantastic.
Yep.
And every living thing has a program like that built it from an original fertilized cell. And it grew it and maintained it. And you would think that would challenge every biologist, you know, including people like Richard Dawkins. But amazingly, they can persist in their blind faith in evolution, despite a truth that is absolutely staring them in the face. I mean, Richard Dawkins is a biologist.
Yep.
Yeah, he understands DNA and how it works, and yet he thinks that program wrote itself.
Yeah.
Well, it has to. I mean, there's no other way, and it's not just unlikely that a program like that could write itself. It's absolutely impossible.
Yep.
You know, there's no way. And it was interesting to me that there was an article on the CMI website only last week that fits in quite well with the DNA story, not just for humanity but also for the animals as well, because as we know, the Bible tells us that all the people on the face of the earth are descended from that one family that survived the flood and was on the ark with Noah, and all the animals that we see on the earth, all the land-dwelling, air-breathing animals that weren't on the ark with Noah, they all got wiped out in the flood, every one of them. So all the land-dwelling, air-breathing animals that we have on the face of the earth now were survivors of that flood. You know, that they were there in the ark with Noah. And I want to talk a bit about that because we all remember the songs we used to sing about the animals went in 2 by 2, you know, all this sort of stuff, and Christians often get criticised for believing what the world sees as a fairy tale. You know, how could you possibly get the diversity of animals that we see on the face of the earth from just one pair? Well, the Bible doesn't actually say it was one pair. It says, and the Hebrew is a bit obscure, but for clean animals, and again we don't know what clean animals are, but for clean animals there could have been either 7 or maybe even 7 pairs. Now, I suspect that clean animals might have been, you know, cows and sheep and goats and things like that, because they were able to be sacrificed.
Yep.
You know, what were unclean animals? Pigs, probably.
Yes. Good chance of that.
You know, but anyway, I want to explore that a bit. So we'll do that when we come back after the break.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. John. If you've got any questions for Dr. John, though, please send them through to our text line, SMS 0401 949 949. You're on Rhema 94.9. It's 22 minutes to 5 and we have Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. He's been answering your questions. We've been talking a bit about recent news as well. And if you have any questions, please send them through to 0401 949 949. Dr. John, we're talking about clean and dirty animals, and of course, pigs we picked as a dirty animal. But what about mice? I've got a mice, a pet mouse, and I mean, he's a little bit dirty. You know, cats they're dirty. Well, I don't know. Which ones are dirty?
Well, the Bible doesn't say. I mean, we can be pretty confident that pigs were.
Yep.
Right. And when you think about it, there's not all that many varieties of pigs in the world. You know, there's peccaries and warthogs and things like that. You know, but there's not that many. I reckon dogs were probably unclean animals, and but a few interesting things about dogs. I mean, it's generally accepted that all dogs were, all types of dogs were descended from some wolf-like ancestor.
Yep.
You know, wolves and coyotes and dingoes and African hunting dogs and all that. Interestingly, I read recently, I don't know whether you saw the article, that and we've been talking about DNA. They reckon that there are no purebred dingoes anymore.
I did see something about that. Yeah, they've all got a little bit of other dog in them.
They reckon about 90% dingo and 10% domestic dog.
Yeah, but my question there is, and I know this is going off topic, but wouldn't that have always been the case if they actually come from a different sort of ancestor anyway?
Well, no. We don't. I mean, when you are going through Southeast Asia, you think the dogs look like dingoes.
Mm.
Yeah, but dingoes certainly have probably been isolated in Australia for 4,000 years.
Yep.
Yeah, and brought here by the Aboriginal people. But they've actually been infiltrated by domestic dogs since then.
Yep.
But look, the Bible, our Bible, say that there was only one pair of unclean animals. But I was reading a Bible version called the Peshitta version.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fairly recent translation by translation into English of very, very ancient Aramaic documents. Now, Aramaic it's a language a bit like Hebrew, but it's a Semitic language. But that was the language that Jesus spoke, right? And in fact, all the apostles would have spoken that language. I mean, we know that the New Testament was written in Greek, but Matthew and Mark and Luke and John and whatever, they would have known Greek, but that's not the language they spoke. They all spoke Aramaic.
Yep.
And when they wrote their Gospels, they would have been thinking in Aramaic and then writing it down in Greek.
Yep.
And Paul would have been doing the same. And in fact, sorry, there's quite a few things that we read about in Acts where, remember when they appointed the deacon, Stephen and his mates. That was because the widows who spoke Greek, who'd come from elsewhere, were obviously only a minority, and they weren't getting looked after in the food distribution because it was the locals, the Aramaic-speaking ones, who were getting all the food, and the Greek women were on the outer.
Yep.
You know, and there's another example in Acts 21 of Paul causing a riot at the temple in Jerusalem, and the commander of the garrison that was keeping the peace was amazed that Paul could speak Greek. Mm-hmm. And Paul said, I'm a Roman citizen. I speak Greek. And then, straight after that, Paul addressed the congregation. It says in Hebrew, but it would have been actually Aramaic because that was what they spoke. But anyway, this particular version says that there could have been two pairs of the unclean animals. You know, naturally enough, when I'm reading a new version, I go to Genesis to see what.
So this isn't really a contradiction. This is actually more just an interpretation from the original sort of Aramaic.
Well, yeah. I mean,
other versions may be misinterpreted.
Yeah. Well, they certainly spoke their language, everyday language for all the apostles, and Jesus himself was Aramaic. Mm-hmm. So when they started to put the stories down, they used Greek, but they were thinking in Aramaic.
Wow!
But it was just an interesting thing that I thought. And then I was thinking again, and we've talked about this before too, about you look at all the different varieties of dogs, and you get that from maybe one pair or two pairs. But look at the enormous difference between all the dogs.
Yep.
And we talked about the dingoes getting infiltrated by domestic dogs, but dogs are quite interesting because when you look at what man has done in producing pedigreed dogs, he's not actually adding DNA information. It's always subtracting some.
Yep.
Because there are no examples in the animal kingdom or the human kingdom or whatever there are no examples of any new DNA ever getting created, right? What God created in the beginning is all there is. And when you get the diversification that you see, and we see it in the dog kind, it's always because some DNA is being subtracted.
Yep.
It's always downhill. You see the same in the adaptation of all animals in the wild. You know, you think of the bear kind, and the bears that survived in the Arctic were those that had the genetics for white fur.
Yep.
You know, because they don't get spotted so easily by their prey in the ice and snow.
Yep.
But all of the bear kind can interbreed. And in fact, I think there's quite a bit of it going on now where the habitat of polar bears and grizzly bears is sort of merging a bit, and we're getting hybrids of polar bears and grizzly bears. Yep. So yeah, all the specific kinds can interbreed, but to adapt to their environment, they are always losing information, DNA information. And that's been one of the accusations that's been pointed at Christians. What about things like, antibiotic resistance in bacteria? Well, again, it's a loss of information. The bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics like penicillin are not the tougher bacteria. They are the weaker ones that always did have a bit of resistance. They haven't developed that resistance. They have been selected because of the environmental pressure of the antibiotic. And same goes for we started off with rats. We'll end up with rats. You know, rats that are now resistant to rat sack.
Yep.
Because the ingredient in rat sack is warfarin that caused internal bleeding in the rats. But it did that in the tougher rats and eliminated them. So now we have the weaker rats left that many of them are resistant to the warfarin in rat sack.
Oh, there you go.
It's always a downhill progression, never an uphill progression.
Yeah, we have no evidence of that at all.
No, none.
There you go. Well, that's pretty much saying we have no evidence of evolution.
I think you could say that, Mick, and
Yes.
that really is the take-home message of this program, isn't it?
Yes, yes, you are on 94.9. Well, thank you, Dr. John. If anyone does have any questions for Dr. John, he'll be back next week. Please send them through to 0401 949 949. You are on 94.9.